Hello and welcome to my third Kungsleden map follow along video. This covers the section between Kvikkjokk and Jakkvik. The map I'm using for this is at 1 to 100,000, so we'll back up a scale and each grid square is now 2 kilometers. This next section is the most remote of the whole Kungsleden. It's about 80 kilometers to Jakkvik. There are no manned mountain huts, there's nowhere to buy food, so you need to make sure you're carrying enough supplies. You can take a bus from Kvikkjokk to Jakkvik, which is a larger town, if you need to resupply properly. It leaves about 5 AM there and doesn't come back until 5 PM, so it will take up an entire day. You need to get a boat over the kind of river delta here. There's a couple operating the ferry who are really nice, and you can call to arrange a crossing. It's a family business which they've been doing throughout 3 generations. There's also another guy who operates a ferry which is slightly cheaper, but apparently he's a guy from Stockholm who's retired here. He's coming and trying to undercut the existing people. I would avoid them. You go down this kind of little river delta here to the crossing on the side. The Bjorn, the boatman, sort of like took us on a little tour around the rivers here, which was really nice, and then dropped us off here at Slatan. The path from the ferry, it's quite steep initially going up the hill, but then soon starts to level out and you're going through some nice kind of airy birch forest, a little bit up and down, but it's fairly easy going, not particularly rocky or anything. Some nice views as well. I mean, they're nice views everywhere really. And eventually you arrive at this emergency shelter here, which I'm not going to try and pronounce the name of. It's by a little bridge over the river, and it's probably a good place to have a camp at. Then continuing onwards, you leave the trees and head up onto the edge of this mountain here. It's exposed and it started raining here, so it was a bit grim. But also it's got really nice kind of like you can see all these glacial landforms here. So there's a big like moraine ridge running along here, and you can look down into this bit of the valley and see loads of like drumlins and things. So that was cool, getting a little bit of GCSE geography back in there. This moraine ridge here there are some good camp spots here if the weather's okay. You keep on heading over by the side of this mountain and then drop down towards the kind of lakes here. Where the path joins up with the river here, there are some good camp spots. You have to scramble down to the river to get water, but there's lots of bits of flat ground which you can camp at. The only thing I would say is that for whatever reason, there were loads and loads of insects there. I didn't realise it, but as soon as I set up my tent, I got absolutely mobbed by insects. I had to make a little fire to try and keep them off while I cooked. But apart from that, it's a pretty nice place. So the trail keeps on heading down, follows the river a little bit, splits off and enters into this birch forest. At this point, it started raining, and it rained most of the day here, so this was a wet day for me, but you're sort of going in and out of birch forest here by these kind of lakes, and eventually you come to this bridge crossing here, which crosses a kind of river between these 2 lakes, and go on to follow the other side. This section here was like really boggy, really wet. You can't really avoid it, so you're just going to have to deal with the fact that you're going to get wet feet if you don't have waterproof boots, which I didn't. Anyway, once you're through that, you head up onto the fell. It's a bit steep but levels out, and then you go through this big ass scree field here, which is another one of those kind of like you're in the most amazing like Japanese boulder rock garden thing. Not the easiest going, but really nice. Path gets a bit easier once you exit the boulder field. You head up onto this ridge that divides the 2 valleys. It was a bit boggy up there, not really a great place to camp, but once you're over onto the other kind of side of the watershed, there's a little lake here with some pretty good spots to camp in. This is where I stayed for that night. The only thing I'd say is it's up on a side of a mountain. It's quite exposed. It was quite windy when I woke up the next day. Bear that in mind if you want to camp there. So the path heads down off the fell and into the forest. It's nice gentle descent. Just after this bridge here, you cross the Arctic Circle. Apparently there's a little sign commemorating the fact that you crossed the Arctic Circle, but I couldn't see it. It's like a tiny wooden thing which I'd missed, and I couldn't be bothered to go back for it. So this section here, you're just going through a bit of forest, a bit of up and down, a bit of rockiness. You start crossing over this Bartek River delta, and eventually head down to Vuonatjviken. I can't pronounce it. You head down to this little collection of houses here where there's a lake crossing. So during the high season this runs twice a day, but because I was here in sort of mid-September when I arrived, there was only one crossing, which is in the morning. So I was here at midday and had to wait around until the next day. The ferryman has a small shop selling chocolate and cold drinks, and he'll let you camp by the lake for free. And there's a little wind shelter to cook in and a latrine. It was due to rain quite heavily that afternoon, so I spent most of my time in my tent reading until the next day. The ferryman's a pretty no-nonsense guy. He makes you wipe your feet before you get on the boat. Ride over to the side of the lake takes about 15 minutes, and you get dropped off just on a kind of little spit here, a little rocky side of the shore, and then you head up this is just fairly steep, and then levels out again nice and when you're on the open fell. Heading over the fell, there's a descent down into the next valley, and from here you can start to see Jakkvik in the distance. This was quite soggy, this section here going down was quite soggy, but I think that was because it rained quite heavily. You go through head through this forest here, and eventually you arrive at the last boat crossing on the Kungsleden. So here there are only rowboats, there's no ferry. The distance is only 400 metres, so it's not super difficult. I got here and there was only one boat on my side, so I prepared myself to row and then row back and then row again. If you have a choice, pick the aluminium boats here because they are lighter and easier to manoeuvre and just better than the heavy plastic ones. Make sure the oar locks are working well, otherwise you'll not have a good time. There's a slight current heading over here, sort of like going this way, but it's nothing huge. You can deal with it. So by the time I got to the other side, there was someone there waiting to cross. I gave them the boat and then didn't have to go back and ate lunch, and there's a little wind shelter on the other side, which I ate my lunch in. So two people that I'd met while I was walking came across on the other side, and I asked if they wanted help rowing the boat back when they reached this side. They said they were alright, and so I continued on, and later I learnt that it all went pretty badly for them. One of them chose a boat with bad oar locks as their second boat to row across, and basically couldn't steer themselves, and some wind picked up and he got blown a few kilometres down the lake, and he arrived at Jakkvik like 6 hours later when it's like an hour's walk from this point. The route from the ferry crossing to Jakkvik is nice and easy. You go along a gravel track for a bit into a water control gate, and then here you head along the side of this lake through the forest and arrive at Jakkvik. Jakkvik's the kind of largest village. There's no fuel station. There's a hostel here. It was sort of closed for the season when I was there. The main building was all locked up, but you could camp nearby, and they had a little service hut which had a kitchen, showers and drying room. Someone will come around each morning and each evening to take your payment for camping there and using the service hut. What you can do there is you can pay for some washing powder and use of the washing machine and dryer to wash your clothes, which was much needed because everything was starting to smell pretty bad. Then the most important part of Jakkvik is it's got an actual supermarket. It's not massive, but compared to all the shops at the hut, it feels pretty big. I think I spent about a good 10 minutes just wandering around and kind of overwhelmed by all the choice there, like vegetables, fruit, yogurt, beer, all the kind of like things you've been dreaming of. So you can do a proper resupply here. I mean, not that you need to carry huge amounts of food for your next sections because they're less remote than the previous ones. So this concludes this video in this section of the Kungsleden. I hope you found this helpful and interesting. The next video will cover the section going from Jakkvik to Amanas. So thank you for watching.